Welcome to this weekend edition of Daily Dose of Greek. I am your guest host, Daniel Stevens, Assistant Professor of New Testament Interpretation at Boyce College, the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. And today we're going to be looking at a typical way in which Matthew, in his Gospel, both transitions from one scene to another and then draws attention to a particular individual or group of individuals within that scene. For the transitional element, we're going to be looking at Matthew 8:1, especially with the technique called the genitive absolute, which begins that verse. And then for the drawing attention to a particular individual within that scene, we're going to be looking at Matthew 8:2, the phrase kai idou. So that's where we're going. But to start, let's look at Matthew 8:1. It reads, Katabantos thou tu apo tu orus ekoluthesan auto ochloi paloi. And when he went down from the mountain, many crowds or great crowds followed him. So this technique that I'm talking about, this genitive absolute that begins the session here, is katabantos de autou. This is the normal way, one of the many normal ways in which Matthew shows a transition from one scene to another. The ways that we can tell that this is a genitive absolute are the following. First, it's a participle, the subject of which is in the genitive and the ending of which is genitive, which has no grammatical connection to the main clause. So the main clause, the verb ekoluthesan, and then its complement auto, its subject achloi poloi, there's no place in that for these genitives to attach. And so because it is grammatically unrelated, it is called an absolute. And this is what these constructions do. It's when you want an action done by someone or by something that is not part of and not the subject of the main verb. It also often, especially in Matthew, has to do with transitions and changes in time and in place. Often verbs of going, like what we have here, are featured in these genitive absolute constructions. This verb here, katabantos, is coming from kata bino, and it is our aorist active participle, and it's masculine genitive, of course, and then singular. How do we get from katabino to katabantos, and why is it aorist when we don't have any sigmas added? Well, if we think of the root here, or the verb that this is based off of, bino, kata is just a prefix meaning down. Bino is one of our words that means to go or to walk. And to move from the present tense to the aorist, we need to remove anything that would be a present tense formative. In this case, that's the iota and the nu, and these are fairly common tense formatives, which means our root is ultimately just ba. Sometimes this is lengthened to be, like in the aorist indicative, we find that this is ebein. This is the so-called third or root aorist because it's the ending added immediately onto the root there. But be, or ba, is what we have to work with. And then we're going to add the normal aorist participial endings, which in the nominative would be nu, tau, sigma, nts, but because of how these consonants interact, we just get a sigma. In the genitive, tos. In the dative, t. And in the accusative, ta. So here, this is what we have added immediately onto our root, bantos, and then our prefix there. So kata bantos, this is our genitive aorist participle, and its subject, the nominal element with which it agrees, is autou. So after he had gone down, kata bantos. Then we're given a little bit more information about from where he went down, apa, from, to orus, from the mountain. So scene setting, Jesus has just finished the Sermon on the Mount, where he went up a mountain, sat down, and began to speak, and now he is going down from the mountain to do something else. This is a normal way, and the normal way really in Matthew, of establishing a transition. Then we get the main verb of the clause, ekoluthesan, and this ason ending here is third plural, which agrees with our nominative plural subject here, achloi poloi. So ekoluthesan from akalutheo, meaning to follow. So many crowds or great crowds followed him, and akalutheo regularly takes dative objects. You follow after someone, bringing out that prepositional sense, but you don't particularly need to. You can just say followed him, and this is the aorist medial passive. This is the aorist passive form in the active from akalutheo. So akaluthes, lengthened the contract, add the sigma, then third person plural ending. And here is our past indicative augment. So they followed after him. So the scene has been set. Jesus has come down from the mountain. Now, to create a point of focus within the scene, we're given the phrase kai idu, and behold. In the beginning of verse 2, kai idu lepros proseuthon prosekune auto legon. This is the normal way, or a normal way, within Matthew. When the narrator says kai idu and behold, attention is usually being drawn to a specific person or to a specific group of persons within the scene. So this is where, if this were a movie, the camera would pan to one who is lepros, a leper. This is the person that we're going to be focusing on, lepros. And we find several things about this leper. Two participles, proseuthon and legon, and then one indicative verb, prosekune. So, proseuthon first, this tells us that the leper went to Jesus. So again, pros is just a prefix, euthon is our aorist active participle, masculine nominative singular, from pros with the prefix. Then erkomai is one of our normal words for to go or to come. It is incredibly irregular, as many common words end up being, and its aorist in the indicative is eothon, which is what you'll find it on if you look up the aorist of it. Once you remove the augment of that, since we're forming a participle, you get the root elf, and then that's exactly what we have here. So proseuthon, having come near, we assume to Jesus. Prosekune. So this is our imperfect active indicative, third person singular verb, and it's acting as the main verb of the sentence, subject lepros. So this leper, this person afflicted with skin conditions, prosekune, he was bowing down or was prostrating himself. This is from the contract verb proskuneo. And while we don't usually think of a as an imperfect ending, because we have the root ending in epsilon and the verbal personal ending also being in epsilon, these contract to a. And so we get what we have here. He was bowing down, or he bowed down. Again, this takes a dative object, so he bowed down to him. Then we're given the final participle of this section, legon, saying. This is a present active participle from lego and usually is used to introduce speech. So this leper, who is the central point of this new scene, comes to Jesus, prostrates himself, bows down in front of Jesus, and says, and that's how the story begins. So through looking at this, through saying this karabantosautu, this genitive absolute, which moves from one scene to another, and this kai idu, which draws our attention within this scene, we're seeing a very typical set of ways in which Matthew moves from one place to the next and directs us for what he thinks is important within his story. Thank you for joining, and thank you for watching the Daily Dose of Greek.